Before we dive into the webinar, I'd like to give you a brief background on Propelics. Propelics creates mobile strategies and world-class apps for the enterprise. We're 100% focused on mobile for the enterprise. We have a long track record of working with Fortune 500 clients, helping them strategize, plan, and implement for various disruptive technologies. And for the last 5 or 6 years, we've been working exclusively on mobile. We're based in San Jose with consultants throughout North America and have delivered many engagements globally. So a brief slide on what we do. We have 3 categories of services. We offer mobile strategy services, which are generally delivered as workshop engagements. Many of them are 1 week long. We're big proponents of the 1 week mobile kickstart. We have kickstarts in a number of areas around mobile app portfolio creation, IT readiness for mobile, BYOD and MDM strategy, rapid prototyping kickstarts, and Center of Excellence kickstarts. We also offer mobile advisory services where we provide kind of a block of hours and services, which we call mobile mentoring, kind of along your way to have mentors by your side to answer your key mobile questions. We do a number of speaking engagements and provide executive education as well. And of course, we kind of tie that all the way through to development, and we have a great UX team and a mobile app development team. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our presenter, Erik Karlsson. Erik is a partner at Propelics. He's a seasoned leader with a keen eye for emerging technologies. He's well respected in both technical and business circles due to his ability to match up the right amount of technology geekiness with business understanding to craft truly unique solutions. As a seasoned executive with startups through successful exits to his name, Erik has the experience to advise companies on the discipline and objective approaches that are needed to turn ideas into reality. So I'm going to hand it over now to Erik, and just as a reminder to everyone, I'll be back at the end to moderate the question and answers, and there will be a special webinar offer at the end for webinar participants. Over to you, Erik.
Great, thanks, Adam. Hi, everybody. Like Adam said, my name is Erik Karlsson. Just a couple things on today's agenda, and good afternoon. Today we're going to talk a little bit about trends and challenges within what's kind of happening within the mobile space today, and talk a little bit more about how we view some of the mobile strategy components and considerations, what we feel are necessary components of a mobile strategy. The topic of this presentation is really around developing your strategy in 1 week. So we'll walk you through some tools and templates and some ideas you guys can use in terms of approach to that type of process, the tools that are in use, deliverables you might want to be able to generate, example schedule, and we'll also show some client examples of clients that we worked this process with. One other piece, just before we get going, when we did sign-ups for this webinar, we asked some questions in terms of what you guys would like to see, and we tried to take most of those into account in this webinar as possible. Obviously, we couldn't take everything with about 150 different types of requests. If we missed your topic, which we might have, go to our website, propelics.com/letstalk, put in a small form there, and we can schedule a 30-minute or hour-long conversation and get a little bit more in detail in terms of what types of challenges you guys are facing if it hasn't been addressed in here. So just as a general kind of observation around mobile, we all know that this idea of mobile is expanding, and this idea of what has before been, specifically around websites and just kind of mobile web has graduated into customer-facing apps on the App Store, and now we're seeing, really, I think the large explosion, and honestly the more exciting explosion for mobile is the idea of mobile applications behind the firewall. That is mobile enabling employees and partners and resellers and other types of constituents in your business, and seeing how we can actually simplify process and move things forward in a much easier way. And so these bubbles we have here on mobile experience and sales and service are definitely expanding at a very great rate. New use cases are coming up every day. Part of that is really this growth that is really consumer-driven, which is that this is a famous Gartner quote from last year, around 70% of customer interactions will originate from a mobile device. This means your customers are finding you as businesses via their mobile device, whether that's local search, whether that is going and downloading apps from the App Store or using your mobile website. That's clearly been a large area. And I think part of that is also that we're seeing this idea of how we interact with customers is starting to change. And there's a Morgan Stanley report that came out about how mobile usage will probably exceed even desktop usage in terms of just desktop internet users sometime in 2014. And we really see that accelerating faster than what is shown here. And really, I think the reason for that is this idea around experiences and being able to use a mobile app based on where my location is, based on when I need that access in an instant-on type of fashion, is increasing that usage. And I think it's a self-fulfilling process here where that increasing usage is creating greater expectations in terms of what is available to me via these mobile apps. And the consumers are out there with those expectations for other businesses, or also the same employees that you have in your business that are looking at large, fat client type applications saying, why is this so complicated? I need to be able to go sell. I need to be able to go service. I need to be able to get internal information, or need to provide information back to the business. And why is it so difficult to be able to do that? And I think part of that is also coming from this idea around BYOD and organizations, allowing and supporting their employees that have employee liable type devices, either accessing their network, either from a guest network type of perspective, or even more directly on an internal private network that might be accessing internal websites or other types of areas. And it's creating a lot of need. And this is from Kelton last year. Around 90% of CAOs were expected to deploy some sort of mobile application within their company this year in 2012. And we definitely see that, if that's an internal website, or if that is a mobile application for their customers, or if it's a mobile application for their internal employees, we're seeing this growth. But at the same point, there's this kind of oncoming wave that people feel is going to arrive here. And I think everyone really wants this channel to be successful, and they like the simplicity, and they like the idea of quick, easy apps and instant on and all these types of things. But I think at the base of it, most companies are really unsure of what to actually do with that at this point. And there's a lot of strategy building, and there's a lot of ways of trying to find new and unique use cases for mobile usage and things like that. And so this most is still most. I think by the middle of next year, it'll be some. And companies are definitely are building a lot of strategies today to define what's going to be important for them in the future, for their employees and for their partners and for their customers. So part of that, kind of why this is, unsure of where to head, is because of the questions involved in this topic. And this is a busy slide, but you guys can get the idea that there's a lot of unknowns when it comes to mobile. There is, we're a large multi-geographic organization with many different business lines. Where should we spend our time? How do we leverage mobility as a differentiator, maybe with our customers or with our partners? Is there a way for us to transform our business, not just take current apps and port? Do we have the ability to leverage mobility to interact with our customers, but not only that, but maybe our distributors, our employees, our resellers, these other groups that we deal with on a daily basis. And from the IT side, there's even more questions. There is, what is the right security policy? Is it a single security policy for all of these use cases? What devices do we want to support? Are we supporting it at device level or an app level? Do we care just about the data? What is our BYOD policy? Are we going to allow private information on these types of devices? What use cases are best supported on a phone versus tablet? And more specifically, what do I need from a network and security and even skills inventory perspective to take these processes forward? And these questions, I think, are now starting to begin to be answered. And we built this slide a few years ago, actually, on kind of where we were from a maturity perspective. And early on, I think even last year and even last couple of years, really starting maybe 2009 through today, we were in this lower kind of portion here, which was this idea that mobile, there was what we were going to actually support was around email, calendar, maybe some small to-do, and we were going to allow people to connect into an application store, public app store, and download apps. and there was some CIO concerns, well, we're not going to allow these devices on our network, and they're not going to have connectivity to corporate information, et cetera. But there's this massive anticipated value type of thing where this could change our whole business, and this has a huge impact on where we're going to head. And that value gap was even was growing day by day in terms of where we felt it could go and kind of what was reality. I think today we're probably somewhere in this area, which is we're seeing some real value be delivered in terms of applications that are ending up on mobile devices, consumer or non, within the enterprise. And today, even today, those are primarily business-related apps behind the firewall as well as customer-facing. The CIO went from really more concerns to now an enabler of those types of things as we have better understanding in terms of security and network access and things like that. But primarily we're seeing is porting of applications. We have apps that we use on a laptop or something else, and we're going to either port that entire app or some small portion of that app to a mobile device. And it's usually extensions of current processes. It might be ERP approvals, it might be CRM in terms of a sales deck or a prospect management system or something for me to help close business. But we really think, this upper quadrant here is where we're headed. And we are constantly challenging our customers and our other organizations we work with to look outside of just this idea of porting and extensions. And so what are these new use cases? Are there ways that we can not just try to control cost and think about laptop replacement, which is a term we never try to use, but really look at ways to find new use cases that we haven't done before, areas that we can really change the way that we communicate with customers or change our customer interaction strategies, change our work patterns in terms of conference room management and this idea around meetings and to be able to make quick decisions on items, new business models that are available. And so we're really thinking forward in terms of the types of use cases that bring us in this upper right quadrant. And we know customers that are hinging on that today and really looking at mobile first even when they look at enterprise systems. So I think the question for us when we talk about mobile strategy and as we get into the process here is not just, hey, we need to build a mobile strategy to figure out our MDM and all these different types of acronyms that get thrown around today. How do we truly leverage mobility? How do we really change the way that we're going to communicate and present information to our employees and customers as well as receive information back? And how do we do that in a way that doesn't just take current process and move it over to mobile devices, but how do we simplify what we're doing? And the reason that we've had process in the past, those reasons might go away with devices such as this. So what are the components of our mobile strategy? And we're going to talk about each of these in the coming slides around how we kind of start building a process through developing a mobile strategy. But some of the major points are here up on top around business drivers. The first, part of that area around how to leverage mobility is let's not forget what we're trying to do. And so we try to spend time and try to educate in terms of how we can use mobility to grow top line, how we can use mobility to grow brand perception, whether that is customer-facing apps or what we call kind of B to E to C, which is employees sitting with customers. And how do we change, our look and feel to the end customer? Retention and loyalty from a customer perspective, their satisfaction, and then more specifically around competitive differentiation, which is a big area for us today, as well as penetration of account, being able to use mobile to be able to increase product line or increase basket size, things like that. And so the first area that we spend a lot of time is just on what are those drivers? What are we trying to achieve? What are those kind of needles that we're looking to impact? On the bottom side, or on the bottom of the slide here, is really around IT readiness. And so there's a lot of areas within mobility that rely on a well put together IT structure. That would be being able to have a single view of customer information and being able to pull data from multiple systems to present that information on a mobile device. That might be related to the maturity of our network and security infrastructure. It might be related to our governance and policies related to BYOD usage. How do we identify when we have gaps in there and be able to try to close those? And just overall services and integration. How do we build, if we're going to develop these applications for a sales team and they're reliant on this data to make money and to grow top line, how do we build a service management type structure to ensure their uptime? And how do we, support those types of devices? So those are kind of the nuts and bolts, right? The kind of typical things you would see. The other 4 boxes in here are areas that a lot of organizations kind of forget to think about. And some of those would be on the right here on mobility perspectives is we have the ability to really change how we interact with the person on the other end of that device, and the device has some capabilities there. So GPS location is a great example. If we're typically asking people to enter data related to this, can we help that? Can we know where we are, and we know where the device is. Can we pre-populate information or make things easier on the user? Camera is another great example of that. It's a whole new area of images capture, which in the past has never really been an enterprise system for many businesses. How do we take advantage of that camera having thousands of cameras in our stores or in our distribution centers or wherever, and use that as a competitive advantage for us? Regulatory is pretty self-explanatory. Customer interaction in the upper left is really helping us rethink our interaction strategies and why we want to communicate and how we're going to communicate with our customers, and whether those are employees or customers. And cross-industry is pretty self-explanatory as well, but there's a lot to learn from retail looking at financial services. And there's a lot to learn from manufacturing looking at retail and things like that. And so we try to bring some of those considerations across. So those are the kind of components of that strategy, but that doesn't really get you 100% of the way there. And so we have a kind of set of considerations that as you guys are building out your own mobile strategy, the things to think about. And you can read more about these. I won't go through all these, but you can read more about these on propelics.com/perspectives. And these things are kind of broken out with some detail in each. But the first one, the one I really want to talk about, and the reason for this webinar is number 1, on the speed of innovation. And, you know, in kind of the core IT mantra and things that we've done, we're enterprise system guys. We've been working in enterprise systems for 20 years. Typically when you're building software, you're building it for that kind of 6 to 10-year window. If I'm building a CRM set of processes, or I'm building an application that a remote field service team is going to use, or things that are used in a production line, I'm typically looking at a 6 to 10-year window. For mobile, we build for 1 year. We know that the devices are going to change significantly. The interaction the interaction we want to have with our customers or employees is going to change. Our ability to deliver solutions faster and quicker in terms of revisions is much greater on mobile. And so we build that for really 1 year. And therefore, spending 6 weeks or 8 weeks or upwards of 6 months, we've heard from other organizations, on mobile strategy just doesn't work. It's too long. You're trying to understand where the business maturity is going to be 2 years from now, and it's just not realistic. And so we try to really compress these timelines and get things down where we're really iterating over and over and over. And so similar to or dissimilar to other types of applications on the enterprise side, mobile, we can very easily push out daily updates to users, and we can force those things down via an MDM type of provider. And we still have to go through those testing and other types of criteria for us to determine that the application is good, but it's not a massive SMS type of program where we're really concerned about having something that doesn't necessarily break. And so iteration. The applications that we're building today, I guarantee in a year from now, the applications you're thinking about for your sales team or for your service team or for your customers is going to be very different than what you guys are thinking about today. And so we try to compress these times and really that speed of innovation and bringing new ideas forward, accepting the fact that you're going to fail on certain ideas and killing that functionality, I think is absolutely the way to go. And it's a way that our clients have been really successful. And so that 1 week idea is just a mantra that we use in terms of getting things going, building that momentum, pushing things out, and then accepting that feedback and iterating on those ideas. So let's get into some of the process. We have a kind of a 3-step approach for what we look at mobile strategy, and I think these 3 steps would work for you guys as well. The first thing that we really look at is around direction setting, which I talked about before. We'll talk about some tools that kind of go into that. We'll talk about some areas that we spend time around mobile app portfolios, around visualization, and around really technology maturity and knowing where to spend our time, and we'll talk about roadmap creation. So let's get into this. The first thing that we want to spend time on is around direction. And, you know, when you start getting into mobile app ideas, mobile has that horrible thing of being a hammer looking for nails, meaning that people come to it with any problem that they can't get solved in other IT ways and say, we can solve this with mobile, which might actually be the case. But it doesn't necessarily need to be a mobile solution, and not everything is appropriate for mobile. And so one of the things that we try to do is really define what are those metrics we're trying to hit. Getting away from porting of applications and other simple type of small cost containment type of areas or reduction in time of being able to log in laptops and things like that, what are those qualitative and quantitative business drivers that we feel we want to go after? So for our customers, these are some of the ones we've tried to target and put some very quantitative numbers associated to these. Top line growth, profitability, enhancing of brand, customer experience, employee experience. Those have all been ones that we say that we want to be able to put something measurable associated to them. The other one is really around innovation. And this is really the harder part of this, which is how do we identify groups both internally within employees or externally within customers, distributors, or suppliers that we can innovate process beyond just taking something and building it into a mobile channel. And so those are areas that we try to look at across a large group and say, where do we feel we can have a large amount of innovation type of work? And so we created this innovation heat map idea, which is for larger organizations, which a lot of the folks on this call are, we obviously are dealing with a wide variety of geographies. We're dealing with a lot of different business lines and products. And so where do you start with that? Are you building a mobile strategy for the whole business, or are you building a mobile strategy for a single line of business, or even a group, or even a geography within that, or even a small sales team within that? And this has been one of the largest stopping blocks that we feel and seen if people have been successful in terms of mobile strategy. They try to build a mobile strategy for, a $6 billion business. It's extremely difficult, and it's very difficult to just look back and say, here's where, this is how we're going to be a mobile innovator. So we spend a lot of time on this innovation heat map, which is looking across business lines and groups on the left-hand side. And at the top, where do we think that we have the highest areas that could really impact one of these business drivers or business values here? But also with that, where are wins that we think we can innovate process and get out of some old ways? Where are some things we think we have these users have a high propensity to actually use mobile? So they're, kind of forward-thinking group where they would actually, spend the time and learn new technology and be able to use it to cut out steps. Will it give us a competitive advantage in any of these types of areas? And lastly, usually the largest one is, what is our kind of overall organizational readiness? Do we have the ability to have the data in a right kind of framed mindset? Do we have the right mindset in terms of process? And what is our overall readiness to be able to deliver this type of solution? And this helps us focus our efforts, and it helps us spend time on making sure that we're building a strategy for groups that we feel, A, have a high kind of propensity for business value. We can see where this could lead to some real growth or some real brand or visibility or customer satisfaction, that have a high propensity to use mobile, that we think give us a competitive advantage, and that might have some readiness for. And not everything's going to be perfect, but we want to know the areas that we feel we have the greatest chance of success. And then within that, try to bring that success to other teams. And so within that single group or single small set of groups that we identify, we kind of go into this idea around really ideation, which is finding scenarios that we feel kind of meet our objectives for what we're trying to achieve, that creates a way for us to be able to come up with and be innovative in terms of the use cases that we think might be appropriate for mobile, and really think about who are the actors within this group that this use case might be appropriate for, and what type of benefits are we trying to achieve. What you see here in this graph is exactly what it looks like. It is sticky notes on a wall. And this is a little old-fashioned, and I'm sure some of you are laughing because you might have done this over your careers. But in our experience, sticky notes and getting away from laptops and getting away from Microsoft Word and getting away from requirements documents and getting people thinking and acting like customers and doing role-playing in a room and getting the energy pump, kind of the blood flowing a little bit, is by far the best way to get new ideas and get some innovation within old processes. It's fun. People have enjoyment with it. They think a little bit outside of the current processes of what they do today, and it turns into a great type of process. And so ideation it helps us at least get some new blood and some new use cases going, even some ones that are crazy, but some ones that really allow us to think how would mobile really affect these types of actors. And notice I'm not saying apps. Application is kind of a delineation we look at later. Right here we're talking about what are we trying to achieve from a use case perspective. And so we try to find those kind of business drivers and values and actor for each of those scenarios. And it's exactly what it looks like. This is an example from a one-week workshop where we're looking at actors on the left-hand side, kind of what types of goals we're looking to achieve on the top, and then use cases and kind of ideas and scenarios thrown against that. So that's really literally throwing stickies up against the wall, but that doesn't get you all the way there. The idea is, how do we start to converge and look at some things that we feel have a high propensity? And so that propensity comes from us in really 4 different types of factors. The first one is we look at the level of innovation and say, are these current porting of applications, or are these things that we feel we're kind of progressing the business process and making our lives easier for our customers, employees, resellers, et cetera. The second one is each of those scenarios or use cases we came up with, what actually is the business benefit? How does it relate back to our top-level goals of what we're trying to achieve? The third one here, what I talked about before, which is kind of organizational readiness. Is this something that we have the processes for in place? Is this something we have the data kind of ready for? These things that we feel that we have a organizational readiness towards. And it doesn't mean it has to be high, but we just want to get an understanding of how much of a change is this going to be for us. And the last one is cost or level of effort, and how easy is this to be able to achieve. And so we look at these lenses, and you can see in this little app portfolio image on the bottom, really what that allows us to do is really rank and stack ideas. And it allows us to look at those scenarios and start building portfolios and understanding where we have work to do. A lot of times we focus, some organizations want to focus on high ROI value or high business benefits regardless of the ease of implementation. They think it's worth it to get to that innovation and to that business benefit. Other organizations want to focus on low cost, and they're going to build a portfolio that they can release quickly and try to build some momentum around it with their customer base. Every organization is different in terms of what the priorities are, but this framework allows us to really slice and dice those ideas and build a way to be able to view these different types of structures. And so you can see here it's a tool-based type of structure, and it's something you guys can easily build yourselves as well, looking at across different actors, the use cases associated with those, how well does that line up to value, what's kind of the risk associated with those, some of the innovation type work, the readiness, the ease of implementation, and really use that as a way to be able to rank and stack scenario ideas. The other part of this, which we want to be able to get into, is really the IT discovery. And so those scenarios are a good place from a business side, and we have some readiness and some ease of implementation, but that's a really high level. It's really development and type of thing. The other piece of it is if we're going to deliver this to a set of end users, say behind the firewall, meaning remote sales teams or remote field service teams or even executives or whoever else, from an IT readiness perspective, are we ready to actually do this? And what do we need to get to that readiness? And so here are 10 different kind of factors or lenses that we look at IT readiness. So everything from enterprise information management in terms of how well is our data structured for these use cases, to IT delivery and support, policy, network and security infrastructure, application development platforms, as well as application development methodologies, maybe some telecom expense type stuff depending on the types of use cases. And so the idea is these are some of the components that we feel are necessary on the IT side to support the portfolio. And so we go through this technology strategy matrix to help look across these different types of groups to say what is important, not just in general. We're not building an IT roadmap for mobile in 2015. We're building an IT roadmap to support the business scenarios identified in the previous step. So do we need an MDM tool today, or is that 6 months from now or a year from now? Do we really care about an F5 proxy for reverse proxying today, or is that something we care about in 6 months from now? Do you want to spend the time now to put wireless into stores? This is a big question on the retail side. Or is that something we can defer and use 3G? So these are the types of questions that I think organizations are struggling with today because they don't have a lot of visibility to the use cases. And so IT groups look at this large area of mobile readiness, and they kind of default or defer back to, we need an MDM tool. And I can't tell you how many conversations we've got in organizations around MDM tools. And our first question is, what use cases are you guys supporting in the MDM tool? And nobody has any understanding of what the use cases are that they're supporting. They just know that they need to secure the device. And a lot of times, maybe it's use cases that we can do BYOD where we don't need to secure the device in this first phase, and we can look at that later. But the idea is we want to be able to look at the IT readiness as associated to the use cases that we care about and the order of those use cases. The one last area and the last box that we want to talk about as part of this kind of mobile strategy components is visualization. And I know it might seem a little strange and a little different to think about visualization when it comes to strategy. And, it's not typically one of those things where we are, if I build a business intelligence strategy, typically doing mock-ups of business intelligence reports is not one of the deliverables. But in mobile, we've found and we really feel it's an incredibly important part of the strategy process. And so it helps us as humans get away and kind of shed off requirements and things that have been done previously. And so usually for our strategy engagements, we try to build a mock-up of one or two of the use cases that come out of those. And so for us, that comes into kind of building an application concept, building some wireframes, and doing an actual physical mock-up, either as an actual application or maybe in a PowerPoint type of situation. But it helps us really visualize what we're trying to get at, and it helps us get away from words on a page and really solidify the experience and simplify the thinking that goes into what we're trying to achieve on the mobile device. We're trying to build mobile applications that handle 80% of the scenarios. So as you guys look at your processes and what you're trying to bring to mobile devices, a lot of groups are trying to handle every single situation that can happen out in the field. We're really not trying to do that. We're trying to get to the 80% rule, where 80% of the time it follows a very simple process or a set of repeatable type of steps. That 20%, we'll figure out another way. People will bring up laptops or they'll call in or whatever. We want to take advantage of that 80% initially, and over time maybe it does go after that extra 20%. But it allows us to really gather that feedback and really allows the team to focus on the experience and what we're putting in front of our employees, not just the bullets. And it's a really important thing for us. And as an example, this is one of our clients where this is an output of a 1-week visualization study as part of a mobile strategy work, which was to take an idea, which was a sales canvas for their sales team, and we had pages and pages of requirements, but how do we simplify that? And the visualization process, which is incredibly important to making us focus on what is important for us. To sum up some of these types of things, we have these 3 components. One was being able to build that mobile roadmap, look at those areas of scenarios, prioritize those based on value, readiness, overall innovation, and these other types of factors. Number 2 was some of the IT readiness portions, meaning being able to look at IT readiness as it supports just that portfolio. Number 3 was the visualization component. And the last piece here is really tying this together and building some recommendations for you guys to be able to bring that forward. And so that would be timelines and structure to say, as you guys try to build and build projects internally to sell executives on where we want to be able to take mobile ideas, that 3 components in terms of IT structure and gaps needed to support these use cases, a prioritized set of small use cases for the business, and a visualized prototype are an incredibly effective way for being able to show ROI. And an incredibly effective way to be able to visualize where this wants to, where you want to be able to take it. And so I think it's an important piece of this process. I know you're thinking this is no way it's possible in a week, but it is possible in a week. This is a sample schedule for a strategy matrix or a strategy type of mobile app portfolio type of work, but it follows the same type of process. Business drivers and structure. What are we trying to be able to achieve? What is the business trying to achieve as a business unit? How does mobile fit into that? Scenario and kind of use case identification, a couple rounds of that. Use case prioritization based on some of these types of rule sets. Do some technical work on the IT side to be able to understand what needs are there to support these use cases, and build some scenarios in detail and build some roadmaps and recommendations and go forward type of plan. Is this the end-all, be-all type strategy? Is this going to work for 2 years? Absolutely not. Will it work for this application and be able to have something that can be taken for one group and maybe used in other groups and build out across multiple different teams? Absolutely. It's an incredibly effective process for that. So just as a couple examples before in the next few minutes here, I'm going to show you 2 examples. One is similar to what we talked about before on an application portfolio. This is the country's largest child care provider, and they came to us. They have a corporate account team that sells child care to large organizations, and they were looking for ways to innovate the process. Child care is kind of you wouldn't think as being a very technology advanced business, but behind the scenes it really is in terms of the amount of data stored in the reservation systems and other types of things. In the centers, however, it's really not. And so they were looking for ways to innovate, and they wanted to look at ways to either sell new accounts from a sales team perspective. They want to look at ways for being able to handling things within center. They want to be able to ways for being able to handle customer type of requisitions for their very diverse customer base and individual folks who need care. And so they had a lot of different constituents. We really were to start with in mobile. A lot of back and forth paper processes for the sales team and other type of groups, even in centers. And a lot of the customer processes were very manual, meaning there were a lot of phone calls. And they would get maybe emails back on certain situations, but it was a lot of verbal type confirmations and changes and things like that. So we ran a one-week process with them, capture and prioritize those use cases, and we really try to benchmark some innovation. We talked about before about kind of putting up some benchmarks associated to how we're going to identify innovation. And we had these 4 areas that we really want to look at use cases around simplifying a very complex process and a very justifiably complex process. How do we grow the amount of subscribers through our mobile efforts was another kind of phase 2 of this. How do we inform people so we get away from calls and give people very tangible documents or emails to show reservations versus to somebody relaying something over the phone. And the last one is how do we differentiate? There's a competitive area within here, and how do we look at when we go into sales type opportunities to show that we're an innovative type of firm. So like I said, we began with the business drivers, and one of their key business drivers was on day one in that application we wanted an extremely tangible benefit. More than center locators and simple type of things, we wanted something that people were going to knock their socks off, and they were willing to wait on that development to get to that point. We identified mobile scenarios for both sales teams as well as the customers themselves, and we went through the same process in terms of grading those scenarios based on value and readiness. We looked a lot at native versus web and other types of technology types of things because we have a very diverse customer base, and we're not sure what people are going to show up with. And so we spent a lot of time talking about application diversity and iPhone versions from 2.2 onwards and iOS and BlackBerry type of clients and what was the right thing to be able to do for our client base. And so where we ended up with that was that we had both, like I said before, consumer, partner, and really internal use cases. We went and spent some time with customers and did a customer survey and found that customers were extremely ready for this functionality, but internally we had a very low readiness, both in terms of process, the quality of our data in some certain situations, as well as the availability of some of our back office systems. So the team internally before the workshop was really spending time around sales type information. We really flipped the work there and really spent time on customer focused roadmaps and focusing on the areas where we had readiness, both in terms of process and in terms of data. We simplified the process for customers. They were doing some of these reservations either over the phone. There was also a website that had 21 steps. We got that down to 3 steps on a mobile device. And so we focused on the 80% of scenarios, not just people hitting yes to the things that they hit yes to every time. We want to elegantly handle changes in notifications and remove those phone processes and grow that user base through mobile app usage. So fold-in marketing efforts, meaning allowing people to scan QR codes on their phone to see if their business was eligible for this type of care, things like that. And we thoroughly thought there were some use cases in here that had the ability to redefine the industry. That means that the technology was going to help rebrand how they provided that care and how they were presented to their large-scale customers. It's a really great use case. And so right now they're in the midst of this first implementation for these customer applications. We're expected to roll out in Q1. Another example of a strategy is with a East Coast retailer, a pretty large one. And IT initiated this conversation. They had some concerns around mobile use cases that were coming out of the business. They thought they heard about 10 or 12 mobile use cases that were coming out of different business groups. They're really unsure of their IT readiness, and they wanted to be IT wanted that approach to say, regardless of what the business comes out with, we want to have a solution to that and be able to say, here's what we can do and here's the cost associated to that. So we spent some time with the business to kind of prioritize those mobile use cases, understand what was out there, determine the IT readiness based on these different factors we talked about before, network and security and MDM and device management and help desk and support, et cetera, and really wanted to define that app portfolio and that initial IT strategy. This was a 2-week process. We spent a week with the business on all, 10 or 12 different groups. We spent a week with IT teams across the gamut, app dev to IT risk to app services to EAs, et cetera. We built the same tools we talked about before in terms of scenario matrices and IT maturity assessments and things like that. What we really found out was there was almost 100 use cases that were out there, and some of those were even being started to be developed or being funded. There was multiple groups targeting the same user teams. So things like in retail, district managers are very, they have a lot of different kind of dotted lines. And so HR and legal and training and store ops are all developing use cases for these types of users. There was a tremendous amount of business readiness, which we were, before going into this workshop, we felt that we had inklings that there wasn't. But the business was chomping at the bit for these use cases, and they had very, very innovative ideas in terms of how to move the retailer forward. It was great stuff. And so that role-based app roadmap was huge in terms of identifying and looking cross groups to identify how many scenarios were for a specific end user or actor. We identified some quick wins and really looked at tablet focus for next year, and IT needs were prioritized based on those use cases. So we had a list of technology matrix in the lower right of about 140 different small projects that we felt over a long lifespan would be important to support mobile, these mobile use cases. And we prioritized that based on what was coming out of the business, which took a very daunting set of tasks to the CIO down to very linear and logical steps to move that forward. And we had, across all three gamuts, people, process, and technology, both from IT org changes and new roles to the process of data movement and how they developed web services to the technology related to reverse proxies and other types of things that they were looking at to be able to do that. But it's a great use case. So that is kind of some of the areas around mobile strategy. And I know an hour to be able to do this is really not enough, but I wanted to give you guys a kind of a taste of some of the tools and techniques that we use to develop mobile strategy, and hopefully some of these will be useful as you guys bring these to your organization. Adam?
Great. Thank you very much, Erik. We have a number of questions. If you do have a question, I'd like to encourage you to ask it using the chat function on WebEx or through Twitter with the hashtag mobile strategy. Before we get to the questions, just a quick offer. Propelics runs a number of Kickstarts. I've highlighted 3 of them here: our mobile app roadmap, our mobile app rapid prototyping, and our IT readiness for mobile. These are 1-week Kickstarts. They're a great way to get started with your mobile strategy. For the webinar participants, we're offering a special of 20% off all services if they're contracted in 2012. And that's some information on how to reach us. And so I'd encourage you to make use of those to, just get in touch with us and ask any questions that you have. So I think we'll get started with the questions. Keep them coming. The first question that we received from a number of folks was, are we going to make this presentation available? I know a few joined late, and yes, the presentation as well as the recording will be available after this call. Our first question, Erik, comes from Stacy, and that question is a question around what skills are needed as part of the 1-week mobile strategy, and how much time is needed for participation from the client to make this successful?
Great question. So I think the skill sets are always a challenge. So when we talk about use case prioritization and kind of identification, you want to find folks in the business who have been members long enough where they understand some of the legacy processes, who understand some of the challenges and can feel the pain of both their employees as well as maybe some customers, and have a vision really for where we think mobile use cases might play a role. So I know that's a tough skill set. Executive involvement is important when it comes to being able to have a vision for how mobile wants, if they have an area where they want to be able to say, this is kind of a vision for mobile, now how do we get there? I think that executive involvement is an important piece. But really you're looking for business owners, not IT liaisons. You're looking for people who are embedded in the business, who are dealing with customers or are creating solutions for employees on a daily basis. And so those would be, in different industries, those are different types of resources, but people who own P&Ls, people who own processes are great resources for this. In terms of the time spent, yeah, that can be a challenge for sure. So for us, typically, we try to recognize that and bring folks in for short sessions and give them their time back in the afternoon or vice versa. So for example, we'll do a kickoff meeting where we bring everybody together for kind of do some baseline and some structuring, identify the quantitative and qualitative business drivers and some of the criteria that we built for those high, medium, low type of situations. And then we'll try to break out and maybe do a 2-hour session on, say, a Tuesday, maybe a Wednesday morning for 2 hours where we're able to do a lot in between that session, meaning take some of their feedback, create those stickies, get them up on the wall, be able to document and carry notes forward, things like that. I think overall, from an end-user perspective, we try to limit their involvement to somewhere between 16 or so hours a week for that 1-week workshop. We've definitely done things where we've spread that over 2 weeks and slowed the process down, which is fine. But I think if you can schedule it, it's better to do it in 1 week. And so we've done that for a lot of different organizations where we've scheduled that out a few months in ahead, where we know that there's a strategy week, we're going to spend some time in that, other things are going to go on hold, and people make the time for it.
Great, thanks. The next question comes from Jill, and that question is, I'm trying to paraphrase here, but I'm from a large company, and is it best to start your mobile strategy at a multi-division level, or choose one division and start there?
Yeah, we touched on that a little bit earlier. I think from our perspective, and we've done large strategies in other older competencies in our careers, meaning we've done large areas around CRM strategy for large-scale applications or BI strategy. And those are typically competencies where you would do that at enterprise level and try to have divisional representation there. For us in mobile, what I mentioned earlier is that I just don't feel that is a realistic type of approach. I think from an IT perspective, you clearly can do some IT readiness thing at an enterprise level from a multinational type organization and say these are some of the standards we're going to invoke in terms of policy, in terms of maybe MDM tools, maybe development tools, partners to be able to use for development, things like that, where you would have some cross-functional or some cross-divisional type of things. When it comes to innovation and really looking at what are we going to innovate, I think it's far better to start. I think it's better to start within a division and even within a group within that division, and let it naturally kind of go from there, and create an application initially, create a couple applications, allow that to be a sales tool when you go into other divisions and say, would this work for you guys? How would you innovate this? And kind of go from there. I think multinational strategies in mobile, from my perspective, I don't think they nearly develop the benefit that you think they would.
Thanks. The next question is from Mark, and the question is there anything wrong with avoiding native device app development, unless the requirements dictate, and trying to use thin or hybrid approach, if at all possible? So what's the benefit of native versus kind of HTML5 type development or the hybrid type development?
Great question, Mark. So I clearly don't think there's anything wrong with avoiding native device app development, and I don't think there's anything wrong with native app development. When we do those use case type structures, I think it's important to think about a little bit of the long term at a specific actor type of level. So my last example there for this major retailer, we had multiple different groups identifying use cases for a single actor or a single type of user. If we have some visibility to that, and we look at not only applications we want to build, we might look at mobile applications, and the last thing you guys have to think about is also you probably are using some sort of software as a service. And you have to look at those software as a service providers to say what applications do they support or maybe release, and we have to look at the devices that those groups do. So in retail, keep bringing up retail, that's the example we've kind of brought through. There's a lot of store-level type of real estate and land development and store-out planning type of software as a service providers that really only develop for iOS. And that might change clearly over the coming years. But for this group, it made more sense to develop apps natively in iOS or even using a tool like a PhoneGap or a multi-platform, but only developing, creating just the application for iOS. So so I think it depends, and I think the use cases and the actors should have an impact on that. So the way that we typically end up with organizations is they're typically developing applications that are secure on a single platform, and as the security requirements dissipate, more platforms come on. And up till today, that has been iOS at a secure, trusted type scenario, BI or business intelligence dashboards, customer information type of apps, other types of things, with an MDM tool on it, and maybe a client device certificate, other types of things where we have very high control over that device. And then as we get more into BYOD and as we get into less secure data elements, that device structure opens. And then I might be developing applications for Android and iOS, or even now coming forward, maybe Windows RT and iOS, etc. But by far, we see that native structure really happening more on a smaller number of devices where we want to make sure we have a higher amount of security associated to it.
Great. Eric, the next question is from Tom, and Tom wants to know, how much does a one-week mobile strategy cost?
So typically our one-week mobile strategies are $25,000, and so that is a 3-person team from the Propelics side. That is usually at least 1 or possibly 2 partners plus a person who would be responsible for some of the prototyping or other facilitation type of skills. So it's a 3-person team from our side, and that's how much it costs.
Great. Well, I think it's time to wrap up now. I want to thank everyone for joining our webinar on how to build a mobile strategy in 1 week. I encourage you to follow us on Twitter @Propelics and to sign up for our blog at propelics.com. Just a reminder, the webinar recording and the slides will be made available to you in an email after this call. So thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.